Views and opinions expressed may not reflect those of the Allen County Public Library, Access Fort Wayne, and or any other supporting groups. If you are interested in producing your own programs for Access Fort Wayne, you can contact us at 260-421-1250.
Welcome to Countyline. Hi everyone, I'm Mike Green, Public Information Officer in the Allen County Commissioner's Office, and welcome to Countyline, the program that features news and information about county government. Yes, I know it should be springtime, we should be enjoying warmer weather and things should be blooming and budding and we shouldn't be seeing snow all around us, but at least on the date that we are tape recording this, it still feels a lot like winter. But trust me, spring is going to be here, probably right before you know it. And with springtime comes the time to get our yards and our gardens ready to go. And so you can be prepared for that. We have come out to the Allen County Extension Service office and met up once again with Ricky Kemery, who is the head of horticulture education here. First of all, Ricky, good to see you again.
Thanks for having me here today.
You promised spring's coming?
Yeah, you know, though the forecast from NOAA and those folks at the National Weather Service, they do predict sort of a cooler than average spring, but interestingly enough, once things start to ramp up, it looks like it's going to be a warmer than average summer. So I guess we'll have to enjoy cool temperatures while they last because it looks like it's going to get a lot warmer.
Think warm thoughts at least for a few weeks. But also, it's a good time really to kind of get organized if we're not necessarily able to get right out into the yards and the gardens. At least we can stay inside and start putting together the things we need to be ready to do once that time occurs. What are some things we ought to be thinking about?
Well, you know, eventually spring will come, and the month of April really is the month that is incredibly busy for gardeners because it is the month for planting usually, and it's the month to begin to look at lawn care and weed control and all those different things that can occur in our landscapes. And it will be tough for folks because, you know, we've had sort of a dreary cold winter. They're kind of restless, but I would advise folks not to get out too early, allow the soils to dry out a little bit, allow the lawn to begin growing. Usually that begins when temperatures are reliably anywhere from 50 to 55 degrees. You can't squeeze water out of soil when you put a little clod in your hand. That's when you have to think about crabgrass control. That's when you have to think about fertilizer.
Okay, and we should have a pretty good moisture table under there because we had a decent amount of snow for this past winter.
Yeah, and you know, the drought monitors are sort of concerned about the upper Midwest this coming season, but it looks like we're left far enough away from that where we'll be okay.
Okay, fertilizer-wise, what do you need to be looking at for particular yards?
You know, we have been really promoting sustainability here in the horticulture department here at the Extension Office. And it's just vital that folks really use slow-release fertilizers in the spring. Well, if you put a fast-release fertilizer and we get a lot of rainfall, then that ends up in the water and the rivers, and we don't want that.
Right.
The other is concern about phosphorus, and so sometimes if your soil test or you feel like you have adequate phosphorus in your landscape, then there's no reason to put a lot of that on your lawn in the early spring because, again, we don't want that washing out into the rivers and waters. So folks can bring in soil, a couple cups of soil here, collected from several different places to the Extension Office. There's a fee for that, but at least you know where you stand on your fertility issues, and then you can adjust, you know, based on your soil test. But in general, please use slow-release fertilizers in the spring.
Okay. One problem I had last year in my yard, and I don't know if other people had it also, I had toadstools all over the place, and not just in particular areas where you have dug up trees and you still got maybe the roots or the stump left over. Just toadstools everywhere. Did you hear last year about that?
We had numerous calls about that, and again, that's because of the moisture, and there's spores, the mold counts. Those contain spores of mushrooms. They can land in the lawn. Unfortunately, there's nothing really registered to control those, so you mow them off, you dig them up, you throw them away. If they're in a mulch bed, you dig them up, stir up the mulch. Those kind of issues, again, occur some years heavier than others, and then, some years you don't hardly notice anything. It just depends on the conditions at the time.
Well, last year was the first year I really noticed it in my yard, so, oh well, I've got work to do maybe again this year.
One thing that we're seeing a lot from already this year is great concern from citizens about the declining butterfly populations. And so already we're getting calls from citizens about, how do I establish a butterfly garden? How do I, what kind of plants do I need? How do I, where can I get milkweed plants for the monarchs? And it's important to remind folks that they can visit here. We do have a birds, bees, butterfly garden here as a demo. So folks can visit these gardens. They're free. You can come anytime and observe what a butterfly garden actually looks like and the plants that make them up.
And you have a great resource here. Not only do you have the gardens that people can visit, as you mentioned, here at the IPFW campus, but you also have your helpline, I call it.
Yeah, the Master Gardener hotliner at the Phone Response Center. We answer anywhere from 5,000 to 8,000 calls a year, and those, the center is staffed by trained Master Gardeners, and they will research the calls or the emails and then call back, usually the same day, with an answer to the question. Nowadays, we're beginning to see a lot more emails, of course, than phone calls, which is fine. Folks can call 481-6826 and press option 2 for our gardening hotline, or they can email mghotline@gmail.com.
Okay, and that'll get your questions answered as well.
Yeah.
Speaking of Master Gardeners, I know that's a very popular program, and in fact, it's become so popular you're expanding. Tell us about that.
Yeah, for the first year in my 20 years in Extension, we offered a spring Master Gardener program in addition to the fall program. And again, there's just so many people that are interested in learning more. And it's not even learning more, it's about learning the research-based methods behind gardening, and that's what the Master Gardener program is about. Fort Wayne has always had folks willing to volunteer for a wide variety of things in town. And Master Gardener volunteers, they contribute anywhere from 15,000 to 18,000 hours a year back to the community, which is a great thing. They're wonderful people, have a good time training them, and the demand for that program is incredibly high.
Right, learning more about horticulture and then turning around and sharing that information with others.
That's very important.
Let's talk a little bit now about the gardens. What are we looking at planting this coming spring and summer? What are the more popular things, and is there anything new that we ought to be looking at?
The interest in heirloom plants is huge. Also, the interest in organic seed is huge. We noticed that at the Home and Garden Show this year. Folks were asking us a lot about organic seed, and they were concerned about, making sure that they were using plants that were heirlooms, which tend to have higher nutrition, not always, but tend. So we see that a lot. There are some new plants out that are, interestingly enough, hybrids of heirloom plants that are being released, and then some tomatoes, for instance, that are being released that have higher nutritional quality. They've been bred for that, hybridized for that. And that's what the public wants, and that's why you're seeing those products.
We think a lot about gardening out in the rural areas of the county and maybe even the suburbs, but urban gardening, that's becoming more popular, isn't it?
It is absolutely huge. There are more people gardening in the United States than ever before in the history of the United States. I'm a big fan of raised bed gardens and community gardens. We actually have 2 community gardens here at the Extension office. Again, that's because of the demand. And I like raised bed gardenings because I'm getting older, Mike, and I can get down okay, but I can't get up that easy.
Explain, what is that exactly? I've never heard of that before.
Raised bed gardens have been around since almost the dawn of time, and there are a lot of advantages. You have better drainage, the soil dries out and warms up quickly. Again, it has easier access. So I'm a big fan of those, whether it's a square foot garden or an African keyhole garden. They've been around for a long, long time.
Well, what's the unique aspect of that? I mean, can you grow anything
You can
for the
pretty
most
well,
part?
for the most part, if you're going to grow a fair amount of sweet corn, and you still need to garden conventionally,
Okay.
things that take a lot of space. But raised bed gardens are good for urban dwellers that don't have a lot of space to garden, and they can be quite attractive. You can grow an incredible amount of stuff in a very small space, and then it takes away some of the tillage things that you have to do each year in a conventional garden. Overall, when you look at the cost estimates versus conventional truck patches versus raised beds ultimately are cheaper in the long run.
Okay, well, you can find out more about that type of gardening and any other type that you like here at the Allen County Extension Office located here on the IPFW campus. And again, if you would, Rick, what's the phone number for the hotline as well as the email address?
Folks can call 481-6826 and press option 2 beginning after April 1st. And then also they can email mghotline@gmail.com.
Okay. Well, Ricky, thanks again for being with us. We appreciate it. Always good to visit with you this time of year, even though it's a little cold, but
Yeah.
we will warm up, and when we do, you're going to want to be ready to work in the lawn and garden. And in order to find out the latest information and to get help, check in with Ricky and the folks here at the Allen County Extension Office. Well, springtime is spring cleaning time around many of the households here in Allen County, and our friends at the Allen County Solid Waste Management District want to re-emphasize their 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle as you begin those projects in the springtime. Stacy Hubbard's with the Allen County Solid Waste Management District, and she's here to talk to us about some things for you to keep in mind as you head out. First of all, Stacy, thanks for being with us again, as always.
Mike. Thanks.
I don't know if people are like me. You start the process of cleaning up, and before you know it, when you're done, it seems like you've got more stuff around you than when you got started. But so let's talk a little bit about indoor spring cleaning projects. Folks are going to be wanting to do a lot of cleaning, especially like the outside of the windows and their house, everything else on the inside as well.
Right.
So from a reducing standpoint, what are some things we need to keep in mind as we begin that cleaning process?
You always want to look at the materials you're cleaning with. There are great substitutes on the counters that are eco-friendly, green products, and we highly recommend that you use those products. You can even make your own products, vinegar and water. It goes a long way, screens, windows, general cleaning purposes.
And as you mentioned, it keeps you from having to use some of those items which we know they work, but,
Right.
but on the other hand, they can cause problems for the environment.
They can be very toxic to children, to pets, leaking into the landfill when it goes to that. And it can combine with other things in the garbage trucks. So that's why we definitely promote green cleaning products, and it does the same.
Mm-hmm. And also, if there's leftover, a product like this is a green cleaning type substance, when you get rid of it,
Right.
after you've finished using it, it's not a problem for landfills, not a problem for the environment.
Not problems for the water system, the drains, or anything. Or you keep it around, it doesn't go bad,
Right.
and you can reuse it.
Painting. A lot of people want to go out and paint inside and out this time of year. Some advice as far as what we need to be looking for as we start that.
The biggest advice I can offer you is the point of purchase. When you're going to buy paint, make sure to read the labels, and definitely a latex paint. It's a water base and it's more eco-friendly. Choosing that type of paint versus an oil-based, there's a lot of ways that you can work with a latex versus oil, more hazardous. So when your painting is completed utilizing latex paint, you might want to keep whatever you have
Sure.
left, or if you don't want to, and you're cleaning and you don't want to keep it around, you can always add a kitty litter to it, to the remaining of the paint,
Okay.
and you want to air dry it. So you could stir it and air dry it, and once it's formed a solid, then you can put that in your garbage.
You can actually put it right into the garbage. It's not something that has to be specially taken care of.
If it's a solid and it's a latex paint,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay, it's a good thing to keep in mind. People are going to want to get outside and do work as well. So from an environmentally friendly standpoint, what kind of things can they be doing or thinking about?
You know, with people raking, and I know I had to do it with my leaves and stuff, and backyard composting, there's many great benefits pertaining to composting in your backyard. And I have some samples here for you just to show, and these are things actually that came from my yard.
You brought those in just for us.
I did. Backyard composting is actually very simple, and it's taking your organic material, recycling it into a rich organic soil. And you could reuse that soil in houseplants or your garden, and it puts nutrients back in. When you're composting, you do want to do your greens and your browns.
Okay.
In your greens, including grass clippings, food scraps, it's the nitrogen that we're after.
Okay.
Because then when we mix it with our browns, such as, you know, dead
Old
leaves,
coffee grounds and things of that nature.
that's your carbon. So when you mix those together, I call it like a cooking recipe. So you put these two together, and then you're going to start your volume, which is your next ingredient, because you're going to have to turn it. Your third ingredient is moisture.
Okay.
You want to keep it damp, like a damp rag.
Yeah.
And then the air. And you can turn it as often as you wish, depending on how much you utilize your pile. And in about as early as 1 month to a year, you can have some great composting.
And if you're like me, a cheapskate, it's a lot cheaper than buying it from a store or a hardware place.
Yes, that's a benefit. You're saving landfill space because you're not throwing this in the garbage. It's being reutilized, and the nutrients are being put back in the ground.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about recycling also, because as people are starting to find things that they no longer need but are still good, there are a lot of ways they can recycle. A lot of different things. Batteries, for example, are mostly recyclable.
Right, batteries, we have a partnership program with Batteries Plus,
Okay.
and they'll be happy to accept your batteries. Other items, you know, if they're bigger items, there's nonprofit organizations out there, and all you have to do is give them a call. They'll be happy, you know, set you up on a pickup schedule if you cannot bring it in. And we have a list of people that accept items for free. And if you're in doubt, we have telephone numbers through our Waste Watcher, and that's both hard copy and electronic that you can call and ask further questions.
Yeah, this is a great resource for you if you're looking for ways to reduce, reuse, recycle, especially in springtime when you're starting to clean up and starting to find things, like I say, you no longer need, or you're no longer using, and someone else can use them, or you might be able to recycle them to the point where you can reuse them again.
Exactly.
And so these are available here in your office, but throughout town, I believe.
In the libraries.
Okay. And also available, as you say, online, electronically. What's the address?
It's acwastewatcher.org.
Okay. So you want to make sure and pick one of these up, and then like we say, as you go about the process of cleaning up, think about ways that you can reduce, reuse, and recycle. Stacy, thanks a lot for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
It's been a problem for years out in Allen County. A neighbor or a neighboring property owner has left their property in a mess. Not enough to create a health hazard, but still, from an aesthetic standpoint, a mess nonetheless. So who can take care of a problem like that? Well, previously, no one really had the authority to handle that, but that has changed now with a new property maintenance ordinance that was recently approved by the Allen County Board of Commissioners. It was brought to the commissioners by the Allen County Building Department. Dave Fuller is the building superintendent here in Allen County and also oversees the building department, and he's here to kind of explain more about what this property maintenance ordinance is all about and how it will be enforced. First of all, Dave, thanks for taking time to talk to us.
My pleasure.
As I said at the outset, this has been a problem for years. Kind of give an idea to folks exactly how this all came about.
Okay. We actually presented a draft ordinance about 6 years ago. There were some public meetings, there were some changes that were made to that ordinance after the public meeting, but ultimately the commissioners at that time decided not to go ahead and enact that ordinance. Since then, we've started receiving a larger number of complaints, primarily due to the fact that the county is expanding from a population standpoint. We're getting a lot more neighborhoods in unincorporated areas. And so no longer are we just a rural county outside the city limits of Fort Wayne and New Haven. And so as we've received those increased complaints, our building inspectors have tried to follow up on those, but in a lot of cases we have no jurisdiction because there was no ordinance or law that allowed us to follow up on property maintenance issues. So we brought it back to the commissioners about a year ago. Basically the same draft that we had after the changes from our public meetings then. Presented it to them. Some additional changes were made. We had it open for a public comment for a period of time, and then presented it to the commissioners in a final draft.
And as we mentioned at the outset, these complaints were not situations where the buildings were unsafe, which you do have the authority to go in and do something about.
That's correct.
And wasn't really posing a threat to someone living in the house or being on the property.
Correct.
Not just the house, but the property itself.
Correct. For years, we've had a minimum housing ordinance, which allowed us, if the conditions did not meet standards from heat, water, sewage, and other things that are in that ordinance, we've been able to respond to those. Likewise, we've also had an unsafe building code, which is a state code that we're authorized to enforce if the building is structurally unsound. And there's some guidelines that meets. So we've had some jurisdiction in those situations. But this ordinance covers those gaps that were in those two previous codes. And it allows us to deal with, as you mentioned earlier, the aesthetic issues, the things that affect property value but aren't necessarily life-threatening.
What type of complaints are we talking about?
A lot of the things we get with those are a lot of trash and debris that are just strewn around the yard, storage of things long-term that are pretty much useless. They would be considered trash by most, but rather than get rid of them, that homeowner has chosen just to put them on the lot. In some cases, abandoned cars that haven't run or been registered for years, and they just get stockpiled on the lots. In some cases, they're property maintenance issues of the structure itself. There may be siding problems or roofing problems, things that aren't necessarily structural issues that would fall into the unsafe building law, but are definitely eyesores to the community and can affect the neighboring properties' ability to sell or their property values.
Are we talking about things like tall grass or weeds or something like that?
Can also include that. We don't want to become a mowing company, but at the same time, there are situations in neighborhoods where properties need to stay mowed. This ordinance gives us the authority to go after those homeowners to try to get those issues taken care of.
What were the concerns that you were hearing from folks that caused you kind of to delay bringing forward the ordinance of the commissioners to look at and resulted in some of the changes you wanted to make?
The original draft several years ago was based on the International Property Maintenance Code, which is a model code that's presented through the International Code Council, and they establish all the building codes in a model form. That was geared more towards a neighborhood code enforcement, similar to what the city of Fort Wayne has. Everything from peeling paint to screens on windows, a lot of things like that. So it was much more comprehensive than what we have now. There were also some concerns from the agricultural community related to barns and fallow fields, things that may be considered covered by that code, but really it's not practical to enforce in those situations. So those are the things that have been changed and modified in this code. There are agricultural exemptions in this code for true farming property. This is geared more towards a complaint-driven situation where there are neighbors close by who truly are affected by the condition of a property.
It's like you said, the development of neighborhoods moving out toward the rural section, yet we still have the farming community that's out there. So
exactly.
It's kind of a way to help them live together with each other in a sense.
That's correct.
Now, you mentioned the city of Fort Wayne's neighborhood code enforcement. Obviously, they take care of problems here. So how far out will your authority stretch within the county? Are we talking, obviously not Fort Wayne, but other communities?
We are. It covers all the unincorporated areas, and we also have jurisdiction over the municipalities that do not have their own code enforcement. Currently, Fort Wayne has its own code enforcement, and the city of New Haven has its own code enforcement staff. So we're dealing, and we'll assist as necessary in those situations, because those are still in Allen County. But our primary purpose is to serve those areas that are not already covered by another agency.
So kind of give us an idea of what the process is going to be. I've got a neighbor who's left a bunch of tires out in the yard. They've been there probably for quite some time. I call your office to register the complaint. What happens from that point on?
We accept either a written complaint, whether it's in the form of a letter or email, whatever it may be, or if it's a call, then our clerks that take the phone calls will actually record that information. We require the complainant give us their contact information, and that's more for our information to get back with those people to get additional information, or if an address they give us is an incorrect address, helping identify the complaining property. But it's also to verify that we're really dealing with a complainant that has a vested interest in that property. We're not interested in somebody, from a priority standpoint, it's somebody that's just driving around the neighborhood looking for something if they don't live in the area. We've got one person that actually handles this in the office, and so those complaints are forwarded to that one inspector, and he is not a building inspector. He is hired specifically for this position. Previous problems were that all this information was going to building inspectors, so instead of them doing their primary job of inspecting buildings, they were getting tied into complaints, and it just got too much. So this inspector will then take that complaint, go out and investigate, get photographs, talk to the complainant and neighbors, homeowner of the property, and try to resolve the issue at that point verbally. If that doesn't happen, either because it's an absent owner or because it's a vacant structure, then he will issue a letter of cleanup for it. It's basically an order that goes out to them and gives them 10 days to resolve the issue. They have the opportunity to appeal that to a hearing officer in an administrative process. If they clean it up, it gets re-inspected and the issue is closed. If it doesn't get taken care of within that 10 days, either through a cleanup or through an appeal, then it will go to a hearing, and that hearing will be set by that officer with a hearing officer, by that inspector with a hearing officer. And it will go before that administrative process, at which the person who owns the property has the opportunity to make their case, present a work order, whatever method they choose to proceed with. Our department will do the same thing, and then that hearing officer will either uphold the order, modify the order, or say it's not a valid order, whichever way they go.
Now, there are fines and penalties that can be assessed.
Correct.
But the main thing is just try to resolve the matter.
Correct. The goal is not to, we can fine up to $500 per day for the violation if it's not taken care of within that 10-day period. That's certainly not our goal to get that money. The goal is to get the issue resolved so that the neighbors can live compatibly together and be satisfied with the way the neighboring properties look.
Yeah, as you say, there is an appeals process that can take place,
Correct.
so it's not so much your word until they've had an opportunity to present their case.
That is correct.
Any idea about how many complaints you receive of this kind?
We have been tracking this for about 4 or 5 years, and it's consistently gone up. Not huge numbers, but it's gone up for the last 4 or 5 years. In 2014, we received 645 complaints throughout the county. So it averaged about 12 complaints a week that we got with that. And that's about 150 or 200 more than we got the first year we started tracking it. So it is going up. We're just getting more population in areas where it's affected.
I was going to say, as you mentioned at the outset, seeing more people moving out into the rural areas, and they're concerned about their property value and concerned about the effect that a blighted property next to them can cause.
Correct, correct. And we've had property owners as well as real estate agents call and say, we cannot sell this property until the one across the street or down the street is taken care of. People will not even
Nobody wants to live to that kind,
That's right.
next to that kind of a situation. What if you're unable to locate the property owner? Let's say, as you say, it's abandoned, the person who was there has left, you're not able to really track down who that individual is. Do you have any kind of authority to make the cleanup or conduct the cleanup there?
Yes, that's where it goes to the administrative hearing officer, and that hearing officer has to uphold that order, but they can direct us then to do the cleanup. We pay that out of county funds at that point, and then we try to collect, if we can find the owner for that, we try to collect through court action.
Okay, what do you think the upshoot of all this is going to be at the end of the day?
Based on the experience we've had, probably in the neighborhood of 80 to 90% of the properties get cleaned up without having to go through a legal process. So it's more an issue of letting them know that there are concerns among neighbors, and they want to be good neighbors too. It's just one of those things that they just need to be aware of. There are some instances where we have to take legal action, and if that's the case, that's what we'll do.
Okay, and as you said, you've already hired someone who will serve in the role of the inspector. So how do people contact your office or that individual in order to register a complaint or even find out more about the ordinance itself?
They can call our main number at the building department, which is 449-7131, and ask for a property maintenance inspector. And if he's not available, I can be contacted at that same number. And then we'll be glad to talk to him, answer any questions. If it's to file a complaint, whoever answers the phone, whichever clerk answers the phone, they can provide the information, and that clerk will take the information over the phone. Or they can send the building department an email or a letter with the information that they're concerned with.
Okay. Dave, thanks a lot for your time. We appreciate it.
You're very
and
welcome.
Best of luck to you on this sort of new endeavor that you've got going. And hopefully, as Dave said, this is a way to solve a problem without having to go into a penalty type situation. Main goal is to try and keep neighboring properties as up to code and as clean as possible. And that's going to wrap it up for this edition of County Line. Remember, you can watch this program as well as our other editions of County Line on both our YouTube channel as well as the video on demand service that we share with the Allen County Public Library and the City of Fort Wayne. You go to our website, www.allencounty.us, and we have links there that get you to both YouTube and video on demand. I'm Mike Green, Public Information Officer in the Allen County Commissioner's Office. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next time on County Line.